Not every dentist, we're not going to be their flavor of ice cream, and they may not be ours. So cultural fit, that buying into how we add value, not every dentist is going to look for that. But we think there's a large segment of dentists that want the support we provide, whether it be call center marketing, HR, CE, etc.
Hey there, dental economist. If you're a dentist owner or a leader within a dental business thinking about growing production, case acceptance, patient and staff satisfaction, positive outcomes, and everything else that comes with running a dental business, then you're a dental economist, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to the Dental Economist Show. We're meeting at the intersection of profit and purpose as I sit down with dental leaders who share their stories about dentistry, business, and growth. Today, I'm thrilled to welcome AJ Peak, a visionary in the dental industry and the founder and CEO of Peak Dental Services. AJ grew up as the son of a dentist and founded Peak Dental in 2008, which has now grown to 60 practices across 8 states. Peak Dental is committed to the highest standards of patient care, and AJ is a frequent speaker at industry conferences and events, sharing his knowledge and passion for the industry with others who seek to grow and build thriving dental organizations. AJ, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
I saw you recently posted on LinkedIn about the importance of having a vision and staying committed to it. I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you came to found Peak Dental and what your vision has been for the organization.
So I started my 20s working for a large consulting firm. I absolutely loved it, McKinsey & Company, and they sent me to business school. And as I was turning 30, I knew that if I left on good terms, that they would always take me back. So that gave me the courage to do something entrepreneurial. And I really wanted to work in a healthcare setting. I had been predominantly doing stuff in banking, financial institutions, and really wanted to help people. And I spent much of my consulting, many projects on the science and strategy around customer experience and how you can have customer experience be a key strategic value proposition in your growth and sort of key moments of truth in various institutions to sort of get unrivaled followership and growth. So I really wanted to marry the two between healthcare and something that was customer experience driven from a science perspective, something you can measure and replicate. My father's a dentist. He was turning 60 at the time. This was 16 years ago. And one thing led to another. I built a big business plan and really incorporated to pursue kind of a consolidated DSO, although at the time that name didn't exist, and turned around and asked him to be the test case. And so we started from the beginning, and sort of the vision day one was to put the patient experience first. That was our number one core value, and really measurable, replicable ways to deliver a distinctive patient experience, be able to replicate it, scale it. So that is something that was sort of core to what we did day one. And also, not just where we located high visibility retail locations, but just doing things with the key moments of truth that would drive repeat visits and higher patient satisfaction, and not just say it, but measure it.
You said your father was 60 at the time of the founding of Peak. So when you go to your dad and you're like, hey, here's what I want to do. And, you said it yourself that, the term DSO wasn't really ubiquitous at that time. People weren't super familiar with it. From a concept perspective, what was the reaction that your dad had? And how did he take to the thought of, hey, we're going to build this organization based off these principles and this desire? But what was his view with that?
He was getting bored and had done well enough that was thinking about maybe retiring and doing something different. My dad, in a small rural town in Minnesota, was reading the Wall Street Journal from as early as I can remember in a small town. And I think he was really intrigued by doing something bigger, broader than just the next patient, the next exam. But at the same time, neither of us ever imagined working together. And at age 60, we really went big. We took his small little cottage practice and built what is now one of our largest locations. So it was a big risk for him and for me. And surprisingly, we got along fabulously well. He trusted me with what I thought I knew well. Turns out I didn't know as much as I thought I did at age 30. But he was very kind and humble with me. And now I look back, I'm like, how did he, trust me? And near misses we had, in the formative years, but we did it. It was insane. I mean, it was more insane for him probably than me at 30, and super blessed that I did it. I'm not sure I'd do it again, but I'm really thankful we did. And it's pretty special doing it with my dad, and especially in those early years, just he and I, 4 employees.
That's great. When I joined Planet DDS about 5 years ago, almost now, I had come from outside of dental. So my experience had been restaurant hospitality, selling software solutions into that market. And I knew that one of the things that Planet DDS focused on was working with groups, multi-location practices, and that was kind of really our sweet spot. But there was also, as I was kind of doing my research and searching on the World Wide Web and across the internet, some negative connotations of DSOs and groups. Recently, I saw a post on LinkedIn. It was Howard Fraun, who founded Dental Town. And he shared kind of a link to a podcast, and it was like, say no to the DSO. And there was a lot of engagement with it. And Brian Kaleo from Dykema and others kind of jumped in and shared some interesting, nuanced perspectives. And it was really great because it actually was a very civil conversation and discussion about pros and cons. What, from your perspective, now that you are 16 years into peak dental services, what are some of the benefits, pros and cons of DSOs? And do you think that in general, DSOs have started to improve their reputation in the industry? Or do you think that there's still kind of a mixed bag there?
I would say one of the very first things I read when I entered this industry was Howard Fraun's book. My father was a big believer in his material in running the business. And actually, much of the stuff he taught is the bedrock of what us as DSOs offer practices. So as such a big proponent in dentistry, what Howard Fraun has taught in the business of dentistry is exactly what we put into practice as a DSO day one. And because of the negative stigma, we didn't actually go by peak dental services for several years. We just wanted to create value and put the very same business practices that Howard Fraun would teach, or marketing tactics, and bring that value to the practices. And it wasn't until later that I think the DSO term had taken hold, and there was different flavors of us adding value that we kind of came out with the brand. I'm obviously biased, but I think we've been able to prove that we can add value to a practice, that we can work with a practice, a dentist owner who's been an owner for 15 years. We can take stress off their shoulders. They can sell half or 2/3 of their practice, changing their financial affairs, and then take home income at greater levels as a partial owner than they did as a full owner. And it's sort of like a home run in those instances. And it's really just economies of scale and economies of scope, whether it be marketing, analytics, systemizing, automation, AI technology that DSOs can afford to invest in, either off the shelf or custom stuff that we build. All that creates the pie gets bigger, and we can all share in that pie, including the provider. Our practices now have more technology than my father could afford, or he might have been able to afford it, but had the courage to afford when he practiced on his own, and he was wildly successful. But now, as a large organization, we can invest in that technology and really get there. And so I think it's come a long way in the last 30 years, the dental groups. And I don't think it's a secret anymore about the value we need to bring to the table. And there's so many different flavors of DSOs that dentists have choice. And I think that's a good thing. And that means that we as DSOs have got to add value. Like, we might add value in different areas, but I actually think it's actually been purely better for dentists economically, in technology, education, stress, risk on that front. And I think we can statistically measure outcomes better, which allows the consumer to benefit with better statistical outcomes. So we can manage the quality at a level you can't do on your own, that same level of rigor. And it's nothing against dentists that want to continue to practice on their own. I think there's a place for that, but I think unequivocally, DSOs are adding real value to the industry and upping the game. And oftentimes the forefront advances that are not only making the dentist's life better, but the consumer outcomes are better.
And he did mention in that post that there is more optionality now for dentists that are graduating, which is a positive thing. He talked about the multitude of different kind of flavors that are out there that are available. So a wider variety of paths that can be chosen. And then he had an interesting example about when ClearChoice first opened up offices in Arizona. They did so much advertising that it was actually a lift for all practices that were offering those services because it became education for the marketplace to understand what was available. So it was a nuanced conversation. And I love your perspective of like, look, if you implement these business practices that you would see in an individual practice, you can do that at scale. You can still provide excellent patient care. So what are some of the things that groups do wrong that kind of feed into the negative stigma? Where does that come from?
You can get into trouble, and I don't think anybody wakes up and does this intentionally, is you get deal slap happy and you just start doing deals and you just buying practices and you're kind of slapping them together and you're hoping to just get an arbitrage. More profits is worth more than less. And you just, regardless of how much value you're adding, how this makes sense put together, and you can really run a risk, I think, at that time, because you're really just aggregating a bunch of legal contracts, but there's no rhyme or reason why all these practices are together. I don't think anybody seeks out for that to go wrong, but that can really, lend itself to, more frustrated providers because there isn't as much investment in adding value. It's really just a scale game. And some people have done really well doing that, but I think it has more risks of maybe a dental practice was hopeful to get support and they didn't get as much support, or they find themselves being a practice that is sort of an outsider looking in where there are all these separate groups that align themselves, but they don't have much value working together on that front. I think that's one of the biggest risks at this stage. That might have been a different answer 20 years ago, but I think right now, the kind of scale quick, put a bunch of practices together. It's not always a bad thing, but it can lead itself to an individual dentist feeling like, hey, why did I do this? I'm stuck with all these separate practices. I'm not really getting the support I was hoping. When the market turned with interest rates, the attractiveness of dental groups like that has maybe waned a little bit. It's waxed and waned. And then you got these dentists who are hoping for a payday. They didn't get a payday, maybe as quick as they were hoping, and they're not getting the support that they were hoping to get. I think that's probably the biggest risk I see.
It really speaks to the importance of diligence by a dentist in the process of who they end up doing a transaction with, if that is a path that they want to take, and if they want to sell and affiliate with a group. And I've thought a lot about that too. It's the kind of EBITDA stacking motion and wondering, aside from the purchasing power that you get at that point, which is the glorified group purchasing organization type engagement, where the value add is and where the support is provided. And I do think it'll be interesting to watch over the next few years is to see how these different models all kind of end up working out and where the real benefit and value is that could be provided. What's important to you guys when you're looking to open or affiliate with a practice?
Many things, but if I had to sort of narrow it down to three, one is not every dentist, we're not going to be their flavor of ice cream and they may not be ours, right? So cultural fit, that buying into how we add value, not every dentist is going to look for that. But we think there's a large segment of dentists that want the support we provide, whether it be call center marketing, HR, CE, et cetera. And so just that cultural fit that, hey, we're better together than by ourselves. And we don't all have to be the same, but if we are all very similar in similar technology and approaches, we can all benefit from that, whether a dentist wants to take more time off and we can bring an associate to support them. And we're all kind of rowing in a similar direction. So I think cultural fit's number one of the dentist. And they want to be a part of this, not just, here's my practice, here's the keys, and I'll give you 6 months and I'm out. They want to be a part of this. They might want to offload some of the risk and the stress, but they're not looking for an immediate exit. So that's one. I think the second, and I've alluded to it, is the value in DSOs is, in my opinion, intensified if we're more similar than different. And that doesn't mean that there isn't your own local culture and the dentist treatment plan and do the kinds of things they want to do, but we have the same technology. that we're using the same analytics, that we're willing to have a very diverse set of supplies, but we don't need 20 different types of 2x2 gauze. And in our world, that really can benefit where on the patient experience. So if we're all committed to delivering a measurable patient experience, then we can all benchmark, which we benchmark more on patient experience than we do any other statistic. And normally the dentists, they all want to provide a great patient experience. Well, what if I can now show you how to replicate that, and we can systematically make a change and everybody's patient satisfaction scores, or in our world, net promoter scores go up. So being more similar than different, committed to that, starting at the patient experience on the way through, still giving the dentist autonomy on treatment planning and procedural types they want to do. But we're much more similar than different, and you can then scale something. And the third for us is density of locations. This is just our business model. We do really well, 10, 20 locations in a metropolitan area, not competing with one another. They're sufficiently far enough. But if we can have 10, 15 locations in a greater metropolitan area, there's just all kinds of benefits, both tangible and intangible, that everybody gets. So dentist wants to go on extended, you go on a vacation, we can get coverage. Somebody goes on maternity leave, we can help each other out. Regional managers can backfill if there's unexpected turnover of an office manager. And then about a third of our business is specialty. Our general dentists can latitude to do whatever they want to do, specialty procedure-wise. But if you can then layer in to that density of practices, an independent, a hub and spoke model of oral surgery or endo, it's really powerful, not just for the patient outcomes. They're all sharing that same patient record, that information, seamless scheduling, benefits. We have full visibility in the benefits, but also just the economics. If we're all shareholders, shared economics gets even more interesting in that model as well.
So you've talked about being more similar than different. You've talked about technology. Can you walk us through what your strategy has been from a technology perspective? Obviously, there's clinical technologies available, but also from the practice management, from software, AI. Share a little bit about what your approach has been there.
It's been a really big journey. And I think we've probably made the biggest advancements in the last 3 years. And the very first enabler for us was to go into a cloud-based system. And it was Denticon. Previous to that, we were 50 plus individual servers, and just the access to data and availability of data and it being in a digestible format was very difficult, time consuming. And so key enabler for us was to getting on one common platform, and not just for one discipline, but we did it for, I think we're one of the few DSOs that have done it for all specialty lines, that we're all on the same cloud-based system. We happen to use Denticon. And so that was a key enabler for us. That then enabled us to look at the whole technology stack and innovation the same, meaning not just for one practice, but okay, what are we going to provide to all? And so on the consumer side, that enabled us to make investments we flicked the switch, and I think in like 4 weeks to the whole network on X-ray AI tech with Pearl. That gave us visibility into patient outcomes, a huge enabler for our providers, our hygienists, our dental teams, and just huge trust factor for patients on that front. So that was a big investment. We standardized to digital scanners. We chose iTero. So you can definitely, I practice what I preach. We didn't do 20 different scanners. Then we went 90% of our practices are iTero scanners as of like 4 weeks ago. That's been a 36-month journey, and we finally kind of got full saturation 4 weeks ago. The other maybe less thought about, but equally beneficial for us in technology is just things that people don't want to do. It's not fun to do, but it's really time consuming. We've really made big investments in automation. As soon as we were able to get the data into one system, we've automated over 80% of our benefits insurance verification. It's upwards of 90% verified, automated within minutes of getting it in the system. The front office these days has to do very little on benefits checks. Payment posting, we're now automated payment posting and elements of bank reconciliation. Somewhere between 60 to 70% of our payments are auto posted, and also enables bank reconciliation. and level of accuracy goes up. Statusing of claims automated, and it just a big element where we used to pay for a lot of labor hours and not for fun work. In fact, it was work you could barely get somebody to do in the States, and we would pay offshore parties to do it and have made big inroads in automating big chunks of that work on that piece. So that's been a really big piece. Even in accounts payable, we've done a bunch to automate self-service on that end. And none of this is fun work. So when you can bring technology to play, people don't even want to do that in this tight labor market. So it's been a big enabler for us and helps out the economics and scalability of our business.
You're right. It's not fun work, but you've obviously been able to receive some really tremendous outcomes as a result of implementing some of this technology to replace that not fun work. Even the implementation of technology is so challenging. I would love to hear your perspective of how you get buy-in from the team, how you all have approached it. There's always hiccups in the road and challenges that are faced through the implementation of any new software solution. What is your perspective on that?
I've gotten it wrong enough to understand what not to do and had illustrations of getting it right. And I would say for us, it sounds so obvious, but when you're in my seat, often you want the benefits now. You get excited about new technology. You just want to flick the switch and reap the rewards tomorrow. And I've fallen prey to that, where I'm like, we want this. This sounds amazing. And we went lightning fast, whole organization, and completely fell on our face. So the reverse of that is, for us, is just piloting, not for long. We found within 90 days, 5 to 10 practices, we can really smoke out any, is this really going to work? Is there something we need to be mindful of when we roll this out everywhere? And that's been the recipe for success for us, sort of 5 to 10 locations, 90 days. It doesn't have to be a long time, sometimes even shorter. Within 45 days, you kind of know if this is going to be real valuable, and then do full tilt. So if we do 5, 10 for 60, 90 days, then we'll do the whole balance shortly thereafter. I think that's really been a bigger, sounds so obvious, but when you're an entrepreneur and you want value right away, it's so tempting. And I've fallen prey to it to just say, yes. You talk to the ops team and they're like, okay, and they do it in 2 weeks, and then it's not their fault. It just was a lot of things to iron out that we hadn't thought through.
A real important part of that is defining what success looks like so that you have an understanding if you do this pilot for X amount of days. What are you looking to see in order to know that it's the right decision to move forward? And I think a lot of people kind of miss that step in that process, or there isn't necessarily an intent at the outset to make a system-wide change with an assumption that it will work and just needing to kind of prove out that it is indeed going to solve for the problems that you're looking for it to solve for. I'd be curious, when you think about both your implementation with Denticon initially and with your implementation with Pearl, what were some of the things that helped you understand that this was going to work out for you?
Denticon, we kind of knew on the practice management software and scheduling, we had enough users that had used it before. So I think that part we felt okay with. I think the biggest unknown was when you go from local imaging to cloud-based imaging, and it has some stigma. And imaging was the thing that I think really got me nervous. I'm a son of a dentist. I built this business sitting in the break room with my dad crying on my shoulder when technology didn't work, or et cetera. So I was extremely concerned about the imaging piece. And so we converted to Apertrix, the Denticon imaging platform. And I think that's the piece that we really tested out. And now we're system-wide, including our specialists. And had you asked me back then, what's the one thing where this thing might go sideways, that was where I was the most concerned. And I think we spent real time working through that. And we had a lot of support and layering on the specialists, whether it be endo or oral surgery or perio. Everybody's user requirements were a little different and expectations a little different. That was the one for Denticon in particular. For Pearl AI, we really, as a business guy, I could see the value immediately, but dentists get a little concerned about Big Brother. And I think we really wanted to get internal PR going between our docs. And I think that early, we did the right thing there. We started with about 10 and really getting, it was 15, some really positive dentist driven praise and publicity ultimately was the key to success. They had their own like WhatsApp chat. They weren't bashing it. They were actually pretty intrigued and they were using it. And that really helped that snowball pick up and use it. And given it's such a clinical tool, even though as a business person, I was salivating to get access to it because it gives you data that we can do a lot of other things with. For us, that pilot and getting that the dentist user praise was really key. And thankfully it was there. I didn't have to prod it out of docs. They were actually really intrigued by the tool and using it and seeing other use cases from it.
You've talked about data quite a bit. I think it's really important. I know you're a big proponent of KPIs. When you think about what helps move the needle for your organization, I guess a two-part question. One, prior to choosing to standardize your practice management solution, was it difficult to be able to track and monitor KPIs? Or were you able to kind of have some layer on top that it ended up solving for that challenge at an enterprise level? And two, what are the KPIs that from your perspective are kind of like your North Star? If you were just going to choose a few that were really important, what would those be?
It's evolved. And I feel like I've been a student on this even over the last 3 or 4 years, more than I would have anticipated on that end. Before we were in a cloud-based system, we did have a way of sucking the data out, but it was clunky. It wouldn't work for this server and you wouldn't know for 4 or 5 days. And just the believability of the data was suspect and it took a lot of spelunking to make sure we were playing with full deck of cards, metaphorically speaking. And the timeliness of the reporting, you're kind of more once a month, you get like a clean data set and you can sort of do stuff with it in Excel. And that was helpful. But today's age, you want it daily to be able to make decisions. And that was really a step curve change for us to go from monthly to weekly to daily on sort of the actions and seeing where there might be issues or we need to lean in sooner, et cetera. When we've gotten larger, the KPIs just kind of globally being able to plan and what's globally working or not working, we've really deconstructed same-store sales into its 4 components. And it's linear math. You just multiply the variables and you get to same-store sales. And so it sounds seemingly obvious. And when you're just a solo practice, not as important, although I think my dad intuitively knew it all, as you got bigger, this has been more valuable to us to measure the business upon, be able to understand where there's issues. And so those 4 components is doctor days, provider days. The other ones is just aggregate visits, what's your patient demand. Then the division of the two, so visits per day. One dentist is doing 12 visits a day versus another one doing 8 visits a day. That has a material impact on their success and the practice's success. Then the last but not least is dollars per visit. And, we are running a business and it's got to have clinical efficacy to it. But that dollars per visit is implied case acceptance and schedule rate is all inherent in that. And so is the business shrinking or growing because you don't have enough providers, you don't have demand, or you're not efficient, meaning visits per day, or your ability to case size and pricing on that dollars per visit. And globally, as you double click into your various segments or regions of the business, we've been really looking at the business from that lens. And of course, if there's a big variance over last year, variance over budget, then you go to the next level of KPIs, whatever that may be. If it's consumer related, is this because of new patients? Is it schedule rate? If it's dollars per visit, is this a new dentist? Is it a payer rate issue, et cetera? So that's kind of how we've been really fixated more recently. And it's gotten us to the heart of what's working or not working a lot quicker.
You said before you kind of went through this that it's been a little surprising to you that it's been such an evolving process of dialing into what the true KPIs are that are important. Why is that? What kind of creates that challenge in dental? Part of why I ask is that, I go to conferences multiple times a year, and one session is always about the KPIs that matter. And if you go to these sessions over the course of half of a decade now, there has not been a consensus where everybody's like, this is it. This is all that you need to know about. And I'd just be kind of curious, with your background, you've got an MBA, you've worked in very data-driven environments. why it's been so surprising and kind of why you think it is so challenging.
I've done a fair amount of self-reflection on this. I think as a founder, I don't want to say struggled, but it's been an evolution for me because when we were 10 practices, I was so close to it. The deconstruction of same-store sales, I would have used it at that time, but I was so close to it. I could be in every practice every week. I knew like high degree of certainty kind of where we needed, what was working or not working, at least the, chief issues that needed to be the focus of the team, whether that be marketing, operations, et cetera, the dentist. When you get to a bigger scale, I think that's been where I've had to evolve as a leader. And I think there's other business executives, they've always been in large businesses, multi-site. And for me, I had to do this evolution of like, I just knew I was so close. It was typical founder. And, then you get to 60 locations, multi-state, and you lose that connection. And can't be in all the practices. So I was maybe reliant on some of the old KPIs that were good enough when I was 10 because I had all these other things I was able to slice in my brain. And so for me, getting larger was a real lesson I had to learn. Like, how do I manage this business? How do I more quickly put my finger on what's working? Is it doctor capacity? Is it consumer demand? Is it pricing, this dollars per visit? Is it case acceptance type of stuff? So I think that's more personal to me. I wouldn't be surprised in the industry that I'm not the only one. It's a struggle to go from 5, 10 to 60 and then larger. And I've never, prior to this, run multi-site. I was in banking and financial institutions. And sure, I was an analytical guy, but I hadn't worked those gears before. And I don't think I'm the only one that has gone through that journey. And, maybe it took me longer than others and some people get there quicker. But I think it's a big deal to have 5, 10 locations. You just know it. If you're a relatively smart person, you can get good reporting from just about anything. And you kind of know, you're so close to it. When you get larger, you've got to be more thoughtful the way I've described. And so for me, that's been a big journey.
That really resonates for me being in different industry entirely on the software side, but it's very similar. And I hadn't thought of it in the context to growing dental organizations, but it makes complete sense. And it's the same for myself, as we go from 10 to 50 million, 50 to 100 million, 100 million plus in annual revenue, each of those stages looks so different. The data that you need to have is different. The models that you need to run become more complex, and the leading with your gut is no longer acceptable. You now have to become more disciplined in making those decisions based off data, even if your gut is still probably right, or at least pointing you in the right direction. It becomes much more important. So that I think was really well said, and not something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about in the context of DSOs. But I think there's a lot of application into understanding what phase somebody is in and what's going to be most important to them in those phases, and the need to constantly be evolving. To that point, kind of constantly growing, where do you go to learn yourself? Like, what's your approach to your professional growth and learning more?
Probably the top 3, in no particular order. I read feverishly, books in business and et cetera. So I do pick up nuggets and pearls there, read a lot around scaling businesses and different things I'm thinking about in marketing, et cetera. The second, my private equity sponsor, Varsity Healthcare Partners, I've got access to operating partners that have been there, done that in healthcare. And then I've been able to network with a bunch of the CEOs and the other portfolio companies, and huge lever of growth for me in that. And then third, I've been in this industry a while. There's people like you, Mike, and others where I've learned to I need help. I don't know it all. It might be texting you or I'm texting another CEO. And how do you think about this? I haven't seen this before. And it's really been a friendly industry where it doesn't feel cutthroat or anybody's out to get one another. And we've been able to collaborate ethically to help each other out.
I agree 100% about the industry being very collaborative in general. It's one of the things that I've really loved about being in dental is it doesn't feel like people view it as a zero-sum game. It's like, look, we can both be successful and we can help each other out here. And I think that's something that's really pretty awesome about this space, to be honest. And I did not feel the same way in restaurant hospitality when I was there. It seemed much more cutthroat. So no, that's fantastic. When you talk about reading a lot, just curious, any books off the top of your head, any recent ones that kind of struck a chord or that you would recommend?
The books that I reread often, because I read a few a week, but the ones that I read every year, Scaling Up by Vern Harnish, Traction, Gene is the first name, Never Split the Difference. Not just on, it has lots of applicability and just conversations with people, probably the three that I come back to often. But there's some other tried and true ones like The Five Dysfunctions of a Team, where people business, the book Influence by Robert Cialdini. All of it's just famous one, How to Win Friends and Influence Others. They're so packed with information that reading it once, you could never be an expert. And so I come back to that and general calisthenics, if you will, and being a business leader and trying to make sure I recalibrate my skill sets on that front. So those I actually read often, the ones I just listed every year, at least once.
Never Split the Difference is part of our book club recently. We also did 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. We have a little internal book club at Planet DDS with the revenue team, and folks across the organization can join if they want. I never thought that I would be a repeat book reader person. Like growing up, it was like, oh, I've read that, I'm moving on. And it always has to be new. And I feel like the older I get, the more credence I place in revisiting really truthful kind of canon books like The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team or Never Split the Difference. And you pull something out new every single time that you revisit it. So those are great recommendations. Any podcasts or anything that you listen to? Are you a podcast fan or blogs or anything like that?
Not recently. I get into them at various phases and then, fall out of favor at various phases. So I do dabble on a variety of stuff, whether within our industry, you mentioned Howard Fran at the beginning of this, or others occasionally. And then sometimes I do stuff in medical real estate and we'll pick up more niche insights that way. So I dabble.
What are you excited about as you look forward over the next 6-12 months?
I think we've just scratched the surface with using the Pearl X-ray AI technology, and excited about kind of 2 or 3 different horizons of using that data, not just to help the providers, but also consumers. And so I think that is something that I couldn't even dream about doing when I started this business, and now can do things proactively with that data, whether it be educational prompts to our providers or direct to consumers, whether that be you've got a kiddo that is candidate for wisdom teeth removal and you get information around the benefits or for orthodontic treatment, or you yourself are a candidate for dental implants. It's just a lot of educational things that I think we can sync up the data and go direct to consumers on education that I'm pretty excited about. Secondarily, I think many of us CEOs were excited about interest rates coming down and the industry kind of getting out of being in second gear in terms of consolidation and growth and getting back to a little swifter pace, I think, on that front and I think that will happen here in the next 24 months. And I'd be remiss if not saying the obvious that I think a lot of us are looking forward to, a little swifter pace of growth, often supported with lower interest rates.
100%. I think a lot of us were very optimistic that those lower interest rates were going to come in 2024 and are not quite as optimistic any longer that is going to take place. And throughout the 24 months, I think that is a good way to look at it. But it has definitely created a whole new set of challenges that were almost unimaginable 4 or 5 years ago. One last question for you, and then we can wrap up. You've mentioned multi-specialty. And it's something that I've also been thinking about quite a bit within the industry. And I'm seeing more and more DSOs that are placing a significant value on offering multi-specialty, though it's still not as prevalent as one would think. It's an important part of your business. Can you talk a little bit about how that became part of your strategy and what it looks like right now within your organization?
It's easier to answer what it looks like now and what works than the how it happened. Really, why it's worked and where it's worked for us is it's got to be symbiotic. And it sounds so obvious, but it's really not obvious if you don't have 10 or more locations and some reasonable drive time. That makes it incredibly powerful. You share the same data. If the specialist isn't a jerk, he or she is someone that the providers want to work with and collaborate with. So for us, it's two bedrocks for that is density of locations. We can all help each other out. Our specialists they're independently branded. So they're still working and supporting independent general dentists. The second is our specialists actually have more ownership, meaning they've got a vested interest. They're not just, hired guns. They're economic interests, just like our general dentists. And so now we've got an alignment on that front. And so the density and the alignment has been really critical of success. The third piece is more being recognized today in the last 36 months, partially due to Denticon and some other advancements. We've got full visibility into that patient insurance. It used to be you just saw what you see, you refer to a specialist, and then they see what they see and use up on the benefits. You don't have the full picture, and the patient then gets upset when you thought they had benefits left over to restore that implant, but they don't. Now we've got full visibility. We also have just a more seamless scheduling. It's not like throwing it over the fence and, they'll call a specialist and get it scheduled. We can really make that be a more seamless experience for the patient, whether it being scheduling for their kiddos, wisdom teeth braces, etc. It's just a better patient experience. And so those three things, I think for us, they fit. And my dad would occasionally do a procedure and it didn't go the way he planned. And, he wanted help from a specialist. It's even safer at getting that help when you're in I don't want to say it's safe, but a collegial environment. If, something didn't go the way you wanted to do on a simple endodontic procedure or implant procedure and you have the specialist there to help, they might have wished you went to them first, but at least you're in an environment that's, you have that backup to do the right thing and kind of improve the situation, whatever went sideways.
What specialties do you offer currently? And are these standalone practices? These are not traveling specialists. You have dedicated offices that are practicing, whether it's endo or something else. Is that right?
Evolution over time has been materially more standalone. So only a couple instances now that we do the traveling roadshow, as I call it. And mostly because our specialists, to retain high-valued, really talented specialists, for them to want to make a career out of this, they don't want to travel. And some of it, the procedures they do, you want it to be safe, have all the instrumentation and supplies, etc. So we've gone to the hub and spoke model predominantly. So hub and spoke will do independent standalone oral surgery, endo, pedo locations, those three in particular. But we also have perio and prosthodontist in our arsenal as well. I think I covered them, ortho as well. So the ones that are more traveling, it's a little easier as ortho. You're not sedating somebody, you're not taking people's teeth out, and there's not as much instrumentation as the other disciplines. And so ortho one is where we're more predominantly traveling, although we have independent ortho as well.
I really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much for joining. Is there anything that I didn't ask about that you wanted to share or that I missed?
No, if anybody ever wants to ask me questions, they can find me on LinkedIn, just AJ Peak or at peakdentalservices.com.
Thank you so much, AJ. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mike.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.